Willpower sometimes gets a bad rap, and I'll be honest, I've given willpower a bit of a bad rap at times. Sometimes it's overprescribed and presented as the only solution if you're stuck in a bit of a hole is that you got to work your way out. Now, there's a degree of truth to that, and it's somewhat paradoxical. If I've no willpower, well, how do I take action at all? And in order to get willpower, to build willpower, you must take action. So where do I go with this? I'm going to talk about this today a little bit. We're on the topic of willpower, and it's part of the ninth of nine essential mental skills to achieve peak performance in your work, in your life, in your relationships, and so on. And these are things I practice. Don't always get it right, but I'm relying on the science of psychology to provide a direction. And we're on day 27. Did I say that already? And this is what we're talking about because it's a component that it's an element that leads to flow state because you've got to do the work, the the, the preparation in advance of competition, in advance of the big day, in advance of the preparation, the presentation rather. You've got to do the work. You've got to train your system one to be automatic. And oftentimes we have the best will in the world, but we struggle to take action in the right direction. Now, it should be said that there's no amount of willpower will help you and me if our process is flawed. If the sequence is off, or we're simply trying too hard, or we're in a bad mood pretty much all the time and we're beating ourselves up and beating everyone else up, there's no amount of strength of mind or of character will produce a better result. I think that's fair to say. You've got to be in good form for your efforts to be fruitful, right? Or in a neutral form, which you'll probably find in flow state, is that you're not either feeling good or feeling bad. You're just in it and you're doing it and you're a part of it. I mentioned that in the last session, 26. So what is it about willpower? Well, in 1998, around I think it was 1998, Baumeister and his colleagues came up with a concept or a theory of willpower, and he suggested that it's finite, that you only have so much, and that when you expend it, that's it, you're done, and you've no energy left, you've no will, you've no power in you to go any further, you've no choice but to back off and rest. It's like an energy source, just like strengthening a muscle or a physical exertion. You only have so much, and when you use it, you're done. Then along came Veronica Job, Carol Dweck, and I think one or two other researchers. Gregory Walton, I believe his name is. And they did some work on this, and they said, hang on a second. What if our ideas of ourselves and our ideas of willpower are a factor at play? So in other words, what if I don't believe willpower is a finite resource? What if I believe willpower is something that's non-exhaustive, that it lasts forever, or it might take a dip at times, but it's going to come back up? What if that's my attitude? What if I don't believe that my willpower is limited? Does that affect my results? And it turns out that it does. Now, you know Carol Dweck. I've spoken about her lots of times, and I've written about her lots of times on Peak Performer about her theory, her mindset theory. Well, that's kind of a colloquial term, kind of a wastebasket term for her work. She did decades of work on self theories, our ideas of ourselves, and our capacity and ability to produce results when things aren't going our way, maybe when we don't have the skills and abilities and so on. Our attitude. I said this right at the start, and you can go back to the beginning of the series to watch or listen more on this topic, Carol Dweck and her work. Our attitude towards failure, how we view it, our concept of ourselves and the world matters. And it turns out that it matters here too when it comes to willpower. And so they did some studies on this particular thing, and they discovered that yes, your attitude or your mindset your approach to willpower counts. I've a number of research papers cited at the bottom of the article down below. If you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on a podcast, click on the link in the description and it will take you to the original. I've also written an article, so let me do this here. So I wrote this article, The Limits of Willpower, Resource Depletion and the Role of Mindset. That's a number of weeks back, a couple of months ago actually. Yeah, back in March I wrote that. And there's some additional links in there as well. In today's article associated with this, I'm talking also about what you can do about your willpower, your levels of perceived willpower. And let's get straight to it. So in the first paper that I've cited today, Goldwitzer 1999 suggests that your intentions to take action matter. So he suggests that you use if-then planning. If this occurs, I'll do that. If this obstacle gets in my way, I will take this action. And even those intentions to take action can count once you write them down and you embed them into your process. I mentioned Carol Dweck already and her work with Veronica Job. If you're to take that research or take a steer from that research, it encourages you and I to adopt a different attitude to our sense of willpower, our own particular capacity. And instead of believing that it's limited, start thinking differently and challenge this automatic thought around your own capacity to achieve something. And quite simply adopt the alternative. Adopt a non-limited view, as it's referred to. Other research suggests that self-compassion matters. So, and I've written and spoken about this before, I've spoken about it with teams and athletes and so on, that not in terms of self-compassion, so to speak, because it's a little bit kind of fluffy and overused, if you ask me. So I frame it in terms of giving yourself a break. And I would talk to clients in this way too. I would ask them to adopt this approach. When things don't work out, when you don't get the result that you wanted, it's connected to mindset. Instead of beating yourself up and giving yourself a hard time for it not turning out the way you wanted, accept it for what it is and give yourself a break. Tell yourself that you're always going to get another opportunity, that this isn't the end. I've learned something from this, so let's go again. Retweak your process and reactivate. Another thing you can do is make sure that your values or your goals are aligned with your values. So willpower, you want to lose weight, Christmas is finished and you're hitting the gym and you want to lose weight and look good for the spring. So how do you maintain that? Well, unless you connect this goal with your value system, your chances of succeeding are significantly reduced. So go back to one of the earlier sessions. I can't remember which one it was, probably 7 or 8 in the series, and listen to what I had to say on value-based goal setting. What do you value? What's important to you? And then attach your goals to that. And then finally, you can train yourself, train your organism. This is system 2, system 1 stuff. You can train your organism to perform or behave in a way that's aligned with your goals. So you can do that through mindfulness and meditation. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a session or two. We're on 27, probably 29. We talk about the daily practice, meditation, quiet time, solitude, mindful practice. I know, again, that's another overused term, or these are overused terms, really quite popular. And when you have an idea that becomes popular, it tends to lose its value because people want to rush to the finish, and get the kind of jam in the middle of the sandwich. I'm going to get into these ideas a little bit further in a session or two, but suffice it to say, and research has shown this, when you engage in solitude and quiet time and meditation and focused attention, you can tune your organism to be more resourceful. You can increase your degree of staying power, your willpower, in order to get something done. In fact, you might even overshoot your need for willpower, so to speak. Willpower is often seen as a way to force yourself to do something that you don't want to do. When you align your goals with your values, when you take the time to tune out from the noise through meditation and other practices, you almost outdo the need for willpower, and you simply act in line with those things that are important to you, and you just do it. So there's no effort necessarily in it. You're not forcing yourself to do things that you don't want to. You do want to, and so therefore they're easier. I wanted to show you these papers because they're easily available. You just drop those references that I've given you into Google Scholar, and this is what you'll get. Implementation Intentions, Goldwitzer, 1999, talks about these if-then statements. Give this paper a read, tell you more about that. If I do this, then I will do that, and so forth. This is Veronica Job and Carol Dweck. Their research showed that depletion effects in willpower are better predicted by people's perception of depletion rather than actual depletion experience, right? So your idea of it has an effect. The more participants agreed with limited resource theory, in other words, your degree of willpower is limited, the more they reported eating unhealthy food, procrastinating, and self-regulating ineffectively while pursuing important goals, right? So, in other words, if you believe that your willpower is limited, it will play out in your experience. Beliefs are strong. Another article on the neuroscience of mindfulness. We'll get into that in a couple of sessions' time. This one's from DC and Ryan. They suggest that your environment is critical in the support, in support of you pursuing your goals. So if you're in a poor environment that runs counter, that doesn't serve you, it has an effect on your ability to be motivated and to get things done. Really important paper. Give that a read as well. And then finally, this one, self-compassion, giving yourself a break, letting yourself off the hook when it doesn't work out. Another really important practice that you can undertake. So willpower, okay, maybe you need willpower to bring yourself to the table, so to speak, perform the practice. But these practices that I've outlined, what you can do about it, have the benefit of tuning your organism to take action, value-based action, that you don't maybe have to try so hard. Okay, let's switch back screens here. We'll go here. So willpower matters, but you can rise above willpower, if that's the right way to put it. You can take yourself to the point where willpower is not as important. Maybe initially it is. So it's a valuable idea, I think, but it's not sufficient on its own. Because sometimes you're just worn out. Sometimes you need a break, and there's no amount of willpower will help you in that regard. In fact, it's more likely to spiral your efforts downwards. Okay, that's day 27. Day 28. What am I discussing on day 28? Well, I'm going to get to, let's see here. I'm going to talk about mindfulness, meditation, and then we're going to move into day 29, and we're going to talk about the practice, the practice framework, what you and I can do on a daily basis to achieve this proficiency in 9 mental skills. So, okay, thanks for listening as always. See you next time.